sky's not blue.
You need to understand that when the time comes, I'm going to be taking over.
Welcome back to the Cult House Podcast. I'm your host, the Scholar of Spite and the Saturday Night Delight, Roger Riddell. Joining me today, he is the editor-in-chief of Decibel Magazine and the author of Choosing Death, the Improbable History of Death Metal and Grindcore, Albert Mudrian. How are you doing today, Albert?
I am doing well, Roger. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. I know you've had a crazy weekend with the Los Angeles Metal and Beer Fest for Decibel.
Yeah, it was a wild week last week. We went to print on Tuesday with an issue, and then on Thursday we flew out to Los Angeles. Well, some of us flew out on Thursday, some of us were there before then. I flew out on Thursday and flew in and just got into our pre-fest that we had in Los Angeles the night before the fest, that had the Locust and Curl Up and Die and Bewitcher and Rude on it. And we did that on Thursday, and then Friday and Saturday was the third California edition of Metal and Beer Fest out there. And then I flew back Sunday, and then I took Monday off. Parts of it, not all of it, some of it. Okay, I worked, but I did work slowly at a leisurely pace compared to what I'd been doing for the past 17 years. So it was good. It was good. It was a good time.
Yeah, how was the fest overall? I know that there's a big Converge set with them playing Jane Doe in its entirety and a few other big things like that. What were some of the highlights for you?
Yeah, the headliners were on the first day. It was Converge performing all of Jane Doe, like you said, which is something that they did for us at the Philadelphia edition of Metal and Beer Fest back in September. So they were the Friday night headliners, and then the Saturday night headliner was Cave In performing all of their Until Your Heart Stops debut from 1980 or 1998, which was the first time that the band has ever done a full album play for anybody. So it was great. It was like super cool to see that. That record was always meant a lot to me. That and Jupiter really kind of stand out for me in the Cave In catalog. We had Dead Guy. This is their first Los Angeles performance ever. Only their third performance in like 25 years. Another one of those was at Metal and Beer Fest Philly. Early Graves performed their last show ever. We had first Sacred Reich show in over 2 years. A bunch of cool stuff. First ever Spirit World show. I know that record has been I've been spinning it like crazy for like the past year or so. So to see them play, let alone have it be their like first show with this kind of metal incarnation of the band. It existed previously as kind of a almost like alternative country rock thing. But the main guy, Stu Folsom, kind of rebuilt it and reimagined it. It's amazing. They totally crushed. There's a lot of great stuff. Got to see AC/DC, or ACXDC, however you want to say it. Ripped to Shreds, who I'd never seen before. Crip Sermon, who I've seen plenty of times as a Philly band and friends of ours. But that was their first California show also. So it was a lot of cool like special things to have out there. And in addition to tons of beer and beer collaborations with the bands and the breweries that were present. I think we had 10, which is definitely the most we've ever had between artists performing and breweries pouring. So yeah, and it was the first time we did it at the Belasco in downtown Los Angeles, which is this gorgeous theater, which is like, it's either almost 100 years old or approaching 100 years old, but it's still, the sound is insanely good. Great staff. Just, overall, like definitely a positive experience for all of us involved with the magazine and the event. That said, it's nice to be back home, maybe coasting out the last couple weeks of the year a little bit compared to the schedule that we've been on prior to that.
Yeah, and what's it like? I know that organizing an event like that to begin with is a huge undertaking, but especially coming out of the pandemic, and it's one of the first kind of festivals like that that a lot of people have probably gone to just coming out of this last couple of years. So, how much more has of an undertaking has that been, just in light of all of that?
I mean, it's a lot of kind of rolling with the punches, I guess I would say, just because some of the things that you have in place, some of the protocols that you have in place when the event is announced can change just by the nature of the pandemic and the uncertainty of cases and outbreaks and that kind of thing. But I mean, the Philly one was at the end of September, which was, I would say it was probably like August. Things started to get really shitty again with caseloads in the US. So I felt like there was a lot of uneasiness going into that one, but in the couple weeks leading up to it, cases started to drop a little bit. So I think people, rightly or wrongly, felt a little bit better about going. It was all weird too, because the show had been sold out since July. So it was a lot of, us just kind of waiting. It's like, okay, what if we just fucking bump it up a month? Let's just do it. Let's make it happen while we can. But I think it was like you said, it was the first show back for a lot of people, especially that one in September. It was my first show back. The last thing I was at was our 2019 LA Metal and Beer Fest in December of then. So I went from December 2019 to late September 2021 without seeing, anything. And obviously there's so many people that I met. It was their first show back. I think that, you take all the precautions that you can if you want to hold an indoor event, or if you have to hold an indoor event because you can't make it work outside. You just need to take every single precaution possible, whether that's making masks mandated inside, or mandating that everybody be fully vaccinated or have tested negative within a recent amount of time. The Philly one was all masked and vaccinated or negative test within 72 hours. The LA one was it was announced under the same conditions, and then it was announced in August, and then in November, the first week of November, LA County had an ordinance going into effect where all indoor events of a certain size, ours being of that size, it was full vaccination only. Negative tests would no longer be accepted. So that changed a lot of things for us, because we had to open up a refund period for people who had purchased tickets thinking it was fully either vaxxed or negative test. And that was unfortunate. It was unfortunate, not just because we had a number of refunds, a surprising amount for me. So I had to get my head around the fact that, obviously it was a blow to the event at the time, but it was also, I think, a blow to the way I imagined people feeling about wanting to protect each other. So it was frustrating at the time. It was something, we all kind of worked to mentally process and get over and move forward with it. What I do know is that I believe it's January 4th in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is doing the same thing, where it's going to be, you have to be fully vaccinated to be inside anywhere that serves food. And since we have a metal and beer fest that traps people in a room for 8 hours, you can bet we serve food there. So we'll be doing that, but at least we'll know what the parameters are going in. because the refunds were, like I said, it was disheartening for a number of reasons. Humanity probably being number one. But yeah, you want to take care of people. You want to behave responsibly. Otherwise, like, you're just going to set this further back. And right now we can execute events and they're not exactly like what they were before the pandemic, but it sure as hell is better than not having anything at all. And I had a great time. Everybody I talked to had a great time. I think if people can deal with the inconvenience of having a mask on or whatever for a little bit, they'll happily watch some bands and drink some amazing beers. I know I was fine with it.
Yeah. I mean, last night I went to, I think, the second show that I've gone to since all this happened. The last thing that I'd been to before the pandemic happened was Electric Wizard up in Silver Spring, Maryland. I want to say like the November before the pandemic hit. And last night I saw Guar and Napalm Death up at the 930 Club. And I Hate God had to drop off of that tour because they had some COVID cases in their camp. Like, I was just looking on Instagram earlier that Mike Dirks from Guar had put up a post that just kind of like ran down the number of people in their crew that had it off and on over the course of things, and like all the precautions that they had gone through to make sure that they stayed on the road. And it's kind of fascinating, like the logistics that you have to go through now to make sure that you can still carry on all of your events safely and like not have cancellations.
I mean, touring it's harder to execute a tour than it is, I think, to execute a one-off festival. And I only say that because I've done two of those post-pandemic, and our tour hasn't started yet, and that won't start until the end of January. But talking to bands who have done it, and they all have a plan, you know. I talked to the Obituary guys about it because they went on like some 7-8 week tour with Black Label Society. It might still be going on. I felt like it was going on fucking forever. But basically, like, how they, you know, we talked to them about how they approached it. And I guess I think it was Don sat down with Randy Blythe at some point. Don Tardy, the drummer of Obituary, sat down with Randy Blythe from Lamb of God prior to the tour, because Lamb of God did that summer run with Megadeth and Hatebreed and something else. And he asked him, like, you know, how do you get through this? Like, what was your plan? And Randy was just like, it's just got to be a no fun tour. You know, you're not hanging out backstage. Get on your bus, get off, keep your bubble tight. Don't do anything stupid. Don't expose yourself, because one case will take out a tour for potentially a week or a few dates, and then you're just really just totally messing with the financials. And they got lucky; they didn't have any. My friends in Baroness, who are super responsible, weren't quite as lucky. They lost like, what was it, like, Baisley told me like 3 or 4 dates in the middle of their tour that they had to sit out before they were in the clear because they got a case in their camp. And they don't know how it happened. And fortunately it was like no symptoms, it just was a positive test. And then all of a sudden you just have to kind of shut it down and like just wait it out. And ultimately those are the best case scenarios, like nothing major, but it's still walking on eggshells a bit. And I think that just for the foreseeable future, it's going to be like that. You know, I don't know when the end date's going to be for when any band that's out on the road can feel comfortable about avoiding this and having it factor in their tour. But for the Decibel tour in particular, which will be in like I said, late January through late Feb, the 4 main bands on it, Obituary, Waste, Gatecreeper, and Enforced, have all completed tours already without incident, which is great. You know, I don't want them to be too confident, mind you. But it's like it's cool that they kind of have that post-COVID touring experience, so they can kind of they know how to behave, what to expect. You couldn't be happier with like a lineup of bands just based on that, you know.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to checking out that Decibel tour too, because Waste is the only band on there that I've seen so far. So
Oh,
I haven't
wow.
had a chance to see any of the other bands yet.
They're all good. I
Yeah.
can confirm. And Spirit World are opening select dates, and since I've seen the one show that they've played, I can also confirm that they are good.
Yeah, and with the Metal and Beer Fest too, like how does it feel at this point knowing that those have inspired other people to do similar events? Because like Matt McGackie with Fox and Hops has done, you know, his beer collaborations with that, and he's got his Brutal Montreal Festival that I think is this week up in Canada. But you know, I talked to him a few weeks ago, and he told me that one of the big inspirations for him was what you all had done with the Metal and Beer Fest.
It's super cool. I love Matt in particular, and he's just like, he is a super beer nerd. I am really hopeful he can come down to the one in Philly that we're going to be doing this year, which is funny because I tried to get Cryptopsy on it, and there was a conflict with Flo, the drummer, but that should open up Matt's availability to just attend and you know, have fun and check it out, because I think he would just kind of lose his mind there, to be honest with you. But no, it's cool. I mean, it's not the truth of the matter is I had this idea like back in 2012 or 2013 or something, and I had talked to a few people about partnering with them to try to do it. And the way it went with the talks and the relationships, it never kind of worked out to a way that I was comfortable with it. And then by 2016, we had built up the Decibel staff where it felt like I had a solid enough of a staff in place for us to execute this ourselves. And honestly, by 2016, I was just fucking shocked that no one else had done this yet. This isn't like a stroke of genius. It's just pretty fucking obvious that these things would go together, and that you would take the most metal leaning breweries and pair them with, you know, bands that would fall under the Decibel umbrella for an event. So for me, it was honestly, I'm still shocked that no one beat us to it in that respect. But I'm happy that we were able to take it and build off it and develop it and turn it into an event that people I know are genuinely look forward to every year, and that it inspires anybody to do something similar, or to no matter what the scale is, or take an event that already exists and bring a beer element into it, whatever it is. I think that's great. It's just more exposure for the breweries. It's more further strengthening the bonds between the two scenes. So that's cool by me.
Yeah, and I know before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about beers, and you know, Droid Theory came up, and they're probably, I'd have to say they're my favorite brewery that's in this area. Whenever I can get a chance to go out there, I try to, and they've got, I think, like just pound for pound, some of the best porters and stouts around, you know?
Yeah, their big boozy darks is kind of their calling card. And you know, they're where I'm based in Virginia, they're 45 minutes from where I live, and I've been fortunate to be out there a few times and get to know those guys, and Mark, the owner in particular. And I've been a fan of theirs since I discovered them at fucking Costco of all places. Like I remember I was in Costco, and this was right after the first Metal and Beer Fest in Philly went down, which I guess would have been like the spring of 2017. And it was like kind of in the 750 milliliter bottle area. And I was just walking by, and there was this art that had a Cthulhu monster on it. And it was like, the name of the beer was Call of the Cthulhu. And I looked at it and I was like, holy shit. And it was, of course, some like 12% ABV stout. And I was like, okay, you're coming with me. And then I looked at the brewery. It was a joint there. I was like, I've never heard of this place. And I went home and like looked it up on the internet. And I was like, Jesus, this is near us. And I drank it and I thought it was great. And I looked at the rest of their artwork and was like, wow, this is really in line with, an aesthetic that I appreciate. And the beer is great. So I just remember tweeting at them from the Decibel account, just being like, hey, you guys don't like metal by any chance, do you? And they're just like, oh yeah. And I was like, well, I have this thing. And they're like, yeah, we know about your thing. And I was like, you need to come to the thing then. You need to be part of the thing. And then I drove down there one week to hang out and meet up with them. And it's just been a really strong relationship ever since. Like they've been at every single fest since then on the East Coast and in Philly. And they're just genuinely great guys who make great beer. And it's been really cool to see them, expand, maybe not expand into the things that I'm super excited about, like IPAs, but like beyond that, I'm happy to see their growth and their profile rise. And I know that when people try their stuff at Metal and Beer Fest, they're floored. So it's fucking great, man. They did the fest beer this year, which was some kind of creamy IPA or something. I can't remember what it was, but holy shit, it was good. And I drank a whole can of it, and that reminds me, when I'm done with this, I have to email Mark and get some more of that, because I couldn't take it home. I couldn't take it on home on the plane because I didn't check a bag. So I need to remedy that, or take a nice trip down to Percival, where all the action is not.
Yeah. I mean, I think they and Three Floyds have the only IPAs that I've ever actually like enjoyed. Usually the IPA is a little bit it's too bitter for my taste. I like the big boozy darks where they've got like a sweetness to them, and sometimes a little bit of a coffee sort of flavor.
There's definitely options if you want to go in a citrus forward kind of IPA. There's another Beltway area one called Solus, who does an IPA called Lucy Juicy, which is one of the best that I've had. Mind you, that was back in the summer, and if I drank it now, I'd probably want to vomit. So it's non-IPA season all the way through. I'm going to say May. Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, you mentioned just randomly finding out about Adroit through just being at Costco. They were on the shelf there, and I randomly like discovered them through a friend who just like brought two of their beers over for like a WrestleMania thing one year, and it was, I think, a bottle of Black Is Your Soul, and there was the other one, I don't remember the name of it, but it had like ghost chilies in it, and it had serial killers on the label.
Yeah. I remember they brought that one. That one had a very, very chilly, very peppery taste to it. I wasn't sure how I felt about that one, but I was a big fan of the Black As Your Soul. Is it Black As YS? Yeah, I believe Black As Your Soul is a porter. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, and I just lost my train of thought. This is the vaccine kicking.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You got boosted today, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to lie down at any point, I completely understand. I had to. It didn't knock me out. It just made me a little off. My second shot destroyed me. So the boost was like, oh, this is fine. I guess I better get used to this bullshit every 6 months feeling like this. But yeah, I think you'll be all right.
Yeah, the first one and this one I felt totally fine through. I just felt like there's a point where it felt like I was slowing down a little bit. The
Yeah.
second one knocked me out for like I think the second day knocked me out for 6 hours. I just had to, tell people that I work with, hey, I need to go lay down for a little bit, so I'll be back in a little while, and then I was totally fine after that.
Oh, I was out for about 30 hours. I was out done. And I felt, it's the worst I felt, I don't remember in years. And I just thought, man, if this is what the shot is, I don't want the real thing. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, no. Yeah, no. But I mean, again, I've met people who have had both and boosted and no reaction to anything. So it's really strange. And I mean, flu shots never really did anything to me. I mean, obviously I know it's a different vaccine, but in terms of like that feeling of what to anticipate, I was just like, oh, maybe it won't be bad. And then, oh, my wife had it. She had her second one before me. So and she had the same thing. So I kind of saw what was in store for me. But yeah, when did I get that? I got boosted okay. I'm knowing, and I can't announce it yet, when Metal and Beer Fest Philly is going to be. I'm now doing the math in my head, like, oh, am I have to have another one before then? And I will have to have another one before we have it. So good, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is eventually just going to be like another flu for us. So
yeah, I mean, I would be fantastic if that's what all it is. I'd be fine with that.
yeah. But yeah, so y'all just put out the top 40 albums for 2021. And as usual, there's a lot of debate over it. Everything from people agreeing to probably a lot more people complaining. So I was just kind of wondering, what are some of the most frequent complaints and critiques that you all get? And maybe some of the most misguided ideas about how you all actually put the list together?
Yeah. I mean, we get we're always first every year with ours, and that is because we're like the only print magazine. Everybody else is a website, so they can kind of like get it up they can put their list up at the beginning of December or the middle of December and like be on that trajectory. That would make sense to most people. But for us, like, we are making a magazine that's supposed to be out to subscribers and be on newsstands in December. So we have to finish ours early. And then in addition to that, the second somebody gets an early copy of it, somebody will type in the list and put it online. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I was just like, fuck this. Like, I'm just going to leak this list ourselves. Like, I'll take all that traffic. Thank you for the work that we did. Like, why should these sites have it? So I think for us, the first reaction is always like, what are you doing? It's November. And what I try to explain I've stopped trying to explain everything because I just don't care anymore. But what I did try to explain at first was like, look, we're not the public. So like every record that's coming out this year, we've had access to. There's not gonna be any surprise drops or anything. Like, we know what's out there. So we've all heard this stuff. Like, oh, this record's not even out yet. Yes, I know. I've had it for like 4 months. Like, and sometimes people don't, they don't understand the way it works with lead times. And especially for us as a print magazine, we end up having stuff even earlier than the majority of the metal press. So that's always one, like, why are you so early? Or it's dumb because you're so early. And like I said, I don't bother. Like, okay, yeah, sure, cool. And then it's just always the personal taste thing where it's like, I can't believe you don't have this record that I like on this list. How could you do this? Like, well, that's a record that you like. It's a list. It's arbitrary. It's a collective voice of over 2 dozen, almost 3 dozen now contributors. People think differently. People have different tastes. It's a collective voice that you're trying to pare down into some cohesive representation of the year. And I mean, I think the weirdest thing this year that I've dealt with, that I've not really dealt with in past years, is artists who didn't make the list being upset about not being on the list. Some artists that I've been longtime friends with, in fact, which was really weird. And like I say this every year when I post it on like my own social media. I'm just like, here it is. It's just a list. Okay. It's a guide. It's not, it's like, it's what happened this year. It exists to hopefully remind people of the really good stuff that they knew was good and expose them to things that maybe they missed, or some things that they've definitely never heard of that were great, that fell under the radar. That's all it's supposed to do. And it's something to celebrate. And if there was something that you really liked that's not on there, that doesn't invalidate your taste, and it doesn't invalidate the list either. So, but it's the internet, and you know, when you talk to people on the internet, it's not going to go well, generally speaking. So I don't get worked up over it at this point. This is 17 years of the Decibel Top 40. I'm glad that people care. I'm glad that it's a list, at least that it means something to people to check out. I mean, I guess I'm flattered that bands are upset that they aren't on it, but really, who cares? Like, you know, like it's just a guide to check stuff out at the end of the day. And I mean, I can look at lists from years past, and I think most of them kind of hold up as still reflections of the year. Sure, there's certain records you look back and like, oh, maybe we were a little too excited about that, or maybe we weren't as high on that one as we should have been, or whatever. But you know, I mean, I always tell people, just don't get. I take the process of assembling it seriously, to do it as well as we can, and make it as meaningful as a reflection of a year as it can be. But the bottom line is, it's just a fucking list. Don't sweat it either way. It's not the greatest thing in the world, and it's not the shittiest thing in the world. It's just a list.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, this isn't a directly like apples to apples comparison, but it's kind of like if someone was to hold the idea that somehow And Justice for All is a lesser record because Metallica lost to Jethro Tull at like the Grammys that one year, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't, like I said, it does not invalidate anyone's taste if they don't agree with it, and the list can't be invalidated by anyone because they don't agree with what's on there. You know, there's with the omission, the sin of omission is like, you know, I mean, what are you going to do? Like, do a top 100 list and then just water down the whole experience? And then, like, I mean, the rankings are so arbitrary, I think, to begin with. Like, oh, well, this record's definitely a 72, whereas this is clearly a 26. Like, what the fuck, you know, like at the end of the day, I know you're like tallying votes, and chips kind of fall where they go, but at the same time, like when you kind of have that minutia that like people begin to argue over, it's just, I think people kind of miss the point, you know. And like I said, it's a guide.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always kind of grateful for, you know, the list at the end of the year as a means of, you know, like you said, reminding me of things that I forgot to check out, or that I you know, just kind of flew under my radar, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that came out this year, maybe I should finally give that a listen.
Yeah, I mean, I see there's things that I see on other people's lists every once in a while. I'm like, oh, they really like that. Maybe I should listen to that. And then I listen to it. I'm like, yeah, I still don't like it. Or I've never heard that, and that's on a list. I need to check that out. And sometimes you find good stuff. And again, that's the purpose that they should serve. But none of them, no list is going to be just authoritative in a sense, no matter how much work you put into it and how many people you get involved in the construction of it. Again, you do the best job you can do, and you put a lot of time. I mean, I put a lot of time into it, just trying to make it good. But like the idea of the airtight list, good fucking luck.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the position of having to like wrangle the votes out of like all your contributors and get all of the little like write-ups and stuff together for it too. So that's like that's almost like putting together an entirely separate publication.
Well, we've done special issues over the years where we take like the top 100 death metal records of all time, top 100 black metal, doom metal, old school metal. We've done special issues dedicated to those things. And I think that's like, clearly those should be seen as guides. I can't imagine why anybody else would be interested in them otherwise, like, and I know people that have used them as reference. I know people have gotten into some like doom metal records or some death metal records that they didn't hear otherwise. They didn't know that they were there. So you can like go that far and turn it into an entire issue. Like we've done it a bunch of times. Yeah, it can definitely be time consuming. And when you're trying to, run a website, run magazines, publish books, do multiple festivals in the fourth quarter. This fourth quarter was pretty fucking crazy. We published a book, we did 2 festivals. We got our tour announced. That'll be early next year. I put together the lineup for the next Metal and Beer Fest in Philadelphia. That'll be announced in January. So it's been a hell of a close to 2021.
Yeah, and you mentioned doing like the special issues for different genres for like the top albums. And it just reminded me that when I was a kid in Kentucky, the local record store that I used to go to growing up, the owner was this older, like he's middle-aged. He had this like haircut that looked like Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. He was a huge Maiden fan. And he had this book that he treated like the Bible that was Martin Popoff and Brave Words wrote it, and it was like the top 100 metal albums of all time.
Top 500 metal albums.
I
think that's what it was. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. That's also pre-internet or pre-scope of the internet as we know it today. That shit was important. There weren't anthologies, there weren't guides, there weren't trusted sources. So I get that. And as somebody who, wrote a book in a time when there wasn't like this, just the internet was a thing, but it wasn't like this inexhaustible resource well of material where you could just like be like, I feel like I want to hear the fifth death demo tonight. You couldn't just like go to YouTube and there it is. So I was like, what does that sound like? So you needed like people who actually had heard this stuff and had spent time with it and had wrote about it to catalog it and kind of tell you what it sounded like. So then you can decide if you wanted to go on that mission to actually hear it, because it would be a lot of fucking work to get your hands on a copy of it. So that stuff, yeah, I mean, I totally get it. I mean, I didn't really have anything like that. I didn't have any of his books. I mean, for more rock music, I think I used the Trouser Press Guide a lot, which I don't think that's a thing anymore, but that would have like a lot of like punk and alternative like stuff listed with write-ups on just any band and each record in their discography. It was like a bunch of like Village Voice writers, I think, that kind of put it together. So it was definitely had a kind of a rock journalist bent to it, not just I'm a fan of music, here's what I like. It was definitely like, if they said it was good, you were like, oh, well, that must be good. Now I know better.
I mean, I think even with the internet now, choosing death is still like, as far as like figuring out what exactly death metal and grindcore are and why people are into them and why people would make this music, that's still pretty much the best guide for like getting into it, in my opinion.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that it still serves as a relevant history to people. Having written it once and rewritten it again to kind of update it. It's interesting because it's kind of this living history at this point. When I started working on it, that music was only about 15 years old, you know, and that book came out 17 years ago now. So over half its history has occurred since its release. So while the initial history doesn't change, I think that, you know, you want to keep kind of adding to it these amendments, these addendums to like what's gone on, and to try to keep it all in one place, or to kind of tell it as best you can in the most streamlined way that like is easy to process but doesn't necessarily skimp on the details, you know. Because I think that that's the best part, is like that like those totally you know, inside quotes and like very specific just like I think like the voice of the people who created the stuff is what's important to preserve. And for me, it was just like trying to make the story make sense, and by allowing them to tell it. So it's an oral history, it's a living history. So yeah, I'm not looking forward to updating it again, but I assume that they'll come eventually where they're like, oh, it's been 10 years since the last one, bunch of shit's happened, so let's get back in there and figure out.
Yeah, I mean, some of my favorite things about it are that you know, early on in the book, you go as deep as like bringing in people like Paul Speckman, who had been part of bands that were sort of like a formative foundation for what would become death metal early on. And then you get to like the middle to like the back like quarter of it, where you get into how some of the labels that got big off of putting out death metal early on tried to evolve and bring in like different sounds for better or worse for them, you know, some could say. And then you kind of like toward the tail end also get into where these genres inspired the sounds of more mainstream acts, and you had like Joey Jordison from Slipknot in there, you know, and he brought a lot of death metal drumming to mainstream kids and basically turned that band into a gateway for a lot of people from like my generation to, you know, basically get introduced to death metal, because I think him playing for Satyricon briefly was how I initially got into that band, and they ended up becoming one of my favorite bands. And then there's just like anything that had a blast beat after I first heard him play, I had to check out, you know.
I mean, that makes sense. And the thing is like, you don't realize it when you're putting it together at the time that I mean, to me, just because of the generation that I was from, and when that book came out, I was 29. When I was 26 when I started writing it. So like I didn't really think of that next generation coming up, you know. I just felt that like, oh, my generation at that point was almost over death metal. It had kind of moved on to other things because the genre had kind of fallen on hard times really between, I'd say, about 95, 96 through about 2003. So I didn't know that there would even be a new generation coming up that would give a shit and want to learn the history and get there through things like Slipknot. For me, it was just like kind of, I felt like the story I was telling, it was to my own generation, and I didn't even think that there would be interest beyond that. And when I talked to Joey and when I talked about Slipknot's role and as this like first really like genuinely extreme band to have this impact on mainstream culture, for me it was not to think of them as a gateway as much to just kind of like show how far this thing got, and to not necessarily to appeal to the guy in the immolation sweatpants, that he should check out Slipknot, but more that he shouldn't just immediately dismiss it as something that didn't have anything in common with what he was into or she was into. So to know that like that band was a gateway, and that like that hearing that band maybe led to kids getting into death metal, even picking up Choosing Death. Like to me, that's just cool. So not something I would have ever imagined while I was putting it together.
Yeah, because I mean, you've even got like the lists in the back of different essential albums that really kind of helps out with figuring out where to start with just trying to get into the genre too.
Yeah, again, that's another pre-internet thing, I guess, because that's like 2004 that came out, and that I had that discography back there, and it's cool, man, because it's like I sometimes I feel a billion years old when I meet bands that I like now, bands that we work with, bands that I put on events, that we put on our covers, and they're like, yeah, I had got Choosing Death in high school and I wrote a book report on it. And you're like, okay, great. Okay, awesome. But it's, again, like realizing that like for them, it's like it was this thing that was meaningful and helpful. And like I've talked to Paul from Blood Incantation about it, and it's like he's like, dude, like I had Choosing Death, and it was this guide for me. And then to see like when the revised edition came out and like Starspawn is now in the discography section, he's like that blows my mind. Like that's fucking cool. Like I feel honored that there's that the generation that came after my generation is like whatever we did, like that they like looked to it in any way to do something that I think is just genuinely awesome. Like bands like Gatecreeper and Blood Incantation and Tomb Mold, and like I love that stuff. And to know that like they were reading the things that I wrote or listening, or like they would discover bands that were my favorite bands based on the things that I was putting out there. Like to me, that it's like a really cool cyclical thing. And now that those bands are like on the cover of Decibel, like they can go on to inspire a generation that's going to come after them. And then I'll be really old by then, exceptionally old. But until then, it's really cool.
And this past year, you all hit issue number 200. What's it like being, that far into a print publication, especially, in 2021? Because I know like a decade ago when I was in journalism school, like people were writing off print media. And I think at that time, the narrative at Northwestern where I was at was that iPad magazines are the future.
Yeah.
Where are those now?
Yeah, I hate those things. I mean, we do a digital version of Decibel, and I absolutely hate it. And I understand like why people need it, not necessarily why they would want it, but I understand why maybe you live in Europe and you don't want to pay an insane amount of money to have it shipped, and you don't want to wait for it to get there. And you could just read it on your iPad and you just want to devour the content. I get that. It totally makes sense. But anybody in the United States who would be like, for $5 fewer, I would rather just put this on my iPad or on my digital device. I don't completely understand. But your point being about the digital takeover, I mean, the truth is, it's like it did happen. It was just websites that just took it, that took the print away for in most cases. I mean, we've been really fortunate in that, like, I think that for us, like, we've never really deviated from where we started in terms of the aesthetic. It's evolved and changed at times, and there's other things that, like, maybe periods, some stuff that we were a little bit more into, but it's like, it isn't something like and I'm not even just trying to shit talk. It's not something like Alternative Press or Revolver or something where they started in one place and they've gone to a bunch of different places to arrive to the thing that they do now, whatever that thing is. Like, there's very much a red line that you can draw between issue 1 of Decibel and issue 200 and issue 208, which just, went to print a week ago. So in that sense, I think that's helped preserve us. But I think it's also that we just began to develop a bunch of other different things that nobody else was really doing who was a magazine, and whether that was like the flexi disc series or the tour or the festivals or the book publishing, books well beyond Choosing Death, things like, USBM and the Obituary book and the Paradise Lost book and the Hall of Fame series and black metal. I think it was people will always in business will talk about, developing the brand, which is, sounds really fucking gross when you say it out loud. But I think it's something that can happen organically if you're looking at it from the perspective of like, what's this cool? I want to do something that's cool. I want to do something that like speaks to me and connects with me. And I think if it connects with me, it's going to connect with our audience because I am a representation of our demographic. I'm not 100% our demographic, but I'm enough of it that if I'm into something, there's a good chance that the people who have been following the magazine will be into it. So you have the idea, and then it's like, okay, is it financially solvent? Is there a way to do it where it can be executed within your vision and actually help the company overall, help the bottom line in addition to making something cool? It's not, and I think sometimes some of the magazines out there that have tried some shit, it's always been how do we make money? And then is there a way to make it look cool? Like, they start from the other direction. And I think people can kind of see through that. I don't think anybody ever really has looked at the things that Decibel has done and thought of them as that kind of obnoxious cash grab. So I for us, we're fortunate. We had the good niche magazine with a dedicated core audience we didn't abandon at any point, and then we were able to naturally kind of build off of it from there. And just we haven't really we've overextended ourselves in the sense that there's only like 5 of us who do all of this. So like we have offers all the time to do more events or more books and like different places, different countries. And it's just like, we can't get to it. We just don't have the capacity. So it's like just kind of knowing what you can do and just like trying to really just grow the stuff organically. And then I think it sticks,
Yeah. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, with that whole digital transition thing that happened, it basically just kind of thinned out what was, high quality that people really loved and what maybe wasn't up at that point. And you kind of saw how that played out with, who was still around when the dust settled. But I think too, there's, kind of in the vein of what you said, it's kind of similar to the way that a lot of the bands now that achieve a decent level of success where, you know, their band is their main thing that's going on. In a lot of those cases, there's almost like, I don't want to say that they've, you know, built themselves into like a brand or whatever, but there's like a sort of like lifestyle that's associated with the way that they approach merch. That you could kind of like draw the line from Kiss to that, but Kiss does it at like a shameless level. But it's like even at one point, Slayer had like throw blankets and branded condoms, you know. You see like bands like Mastodon have, you know, a range of merch that's beyond just like the standard t-shirts. Behemoth has every ridiculous thing under the sun, and it's kind of interesting just seeing how that all has evolved with music going digital, and now the magazines and, you know, other things like that that have stuck around and really survived well also offer like a whole range of other things that kind of fit their readers' lifestyles.
Yeah, I like I said, I think you can do that as long as it's coming from the honest place of a fan, or, you know, or like it's coming from a genuine fandom. Like again, it's like the stuff that like I get excited about, that I'm like, oh, this would be cool. Like even these like fucking long box CDs we're putting out with bands now, like it was just a dumb idea that I had, that I was like, wouldn't this be fun and like nostalgic for like a certain segment to just be like, to just get a CD long box, knowing that there'd only be a couple hundred of them produced, so it wouldn't be like this horrible like environmental scourge like it was in the late 80s and early 90s, when millions upon millions of them were being produced and like just thrown away upon release. This would just go to the most nerdy of collector nerds, and they could appreciate it and like, you know, have fun with it. Again, it really comes down to like, what is a natural idea, not like it's always the idea first that's just kind of born out of fandom, and then you try to make it work financially, and sometimes it's like, sometimes you can't even make it work financially, but you're just like, yeah, fuck it, we can do it once, and it'll be worth doing just to do it for fun. But I think that I think that not everybody maybe has that approach, and I understand that when you feel like you need to be in survival mode, and it's been a long time since we've kind of felt like that. I mean, honestly, it's probably been since the Great Recession of like 2008, 2009, probably the last time we felt like that, even through the pandemic, where obviously there were like significant question marks at the start. I always felt like we can navigate this. But, and you know, part of that is the fact that we have a diverse again, brand, for lack of a better word, with these things. Like we were able, when live events went away, we were like, oh, we can put another book on the schedule that wasn't going to be on the schedule. If I don't have to worry about putting together in two more events, we can put out another book this year. You know, or a book that we've wanted to get to but couldn't before, just because there's only 365 days in a year and 24 hours in a day. So I think that, again, that's really the difference, you know?
Yeah. I mean, people can definitely tell when, you know, someone's just trying to be like a middleman and slap their logo on something to hawk a product, versus, you know, when it's coming from like an authentic, you know, this is something that's cool and I like it, and, you know, I think you'll like it too.
Yeah, that's honestly, that you said what I was rambling about for like 5 minutes and like 10 seconds. Thank you.
Yeah, man, I've had you for like an hour now, so I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know it's getting late. But Is there anything else that you wanted to throw in here before we log off here?
I mean, no, just that I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate people having interest in what we do after all these years still, and being fanatical about it. And it's been cool to connect with people in person again over the past few months at the Metal at Each Coast for the Metal and Beer Fests, and kind of like remember what that experience is like, and like see the excitement in people's eyes when they're in a room with bands and cool beers again, cool people. I don't take it for granted. It obviously wore us all out, but I wouldn't trade that sleep that I lost for not doing it. That's for certain. I hope that things continue to progress, and that people continue to take care of each other so we can keep that stuff going, because if there was another event shut down, it would be fairly catastrophic for the music industry to weather that one a second time. So I'm hopeful, and I'm excited to take a deep breath and reflect on 2021 and get to fucking work on 2022, because we've got more events, more magazines, more books, more cool things that I'm excited about, that I think our audience would be excited about too.
Yeah, and just before we log off here too, I will personally vouch not just for Choosing Death, but also for your all's book that came out last year on US black metal, and also Dial Patterson's black metal, The Cult Never Dies.
I love that. That we hooked up with Dial. And Dial, the cool thing is we're doing books with Dial now in Europe, where he's got a version of USBM. He'll have a version of the Obituary biography that we did that'll be out next year. So yeah, it's like, he's a friend of ours. I have a ton of respect for him. Funny story, I met Dial for the very first time in 2005 in London, when I did a Choosing Death book signing with Jeff Walker, while Carcass was inactive at the time, Lee Dorian and Shane Embry, and we were in the basement of the Rough Trade record shop in London. And we had a band the band was called Ted Mall or something. It was like, they had some connection to Akercocke. I don't remember. I think maybe like a bassist was in the band or something, but they played like this tiny record store basement with all of us. And Dial was there. I met him, and he gave me a copy of the zine that he did back then, which maybe it was called Crypt. I'm having a hard time remembering. I'd have to look it up. He, obviously he would know. But yeah, I met him, and he gave me that. I remember reading the zine like on the plane on the way back to the States, like later on. But that's like seeing him almost as like, essentially like a little kid back then, to like, what he's built with Cult Never Dies, and the books that he's written himself, and the books that he's published, and the stuff that he's went out and found and curated into that library that they have. It's just it's super cool. So yeah, Dial is a good one. Dial's a good egg. But it's funny to think back to how long I've known him in that sense now, like well before his book on Feral House came out. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I think if there were any other sort of collections that you all could put out that I would get really excited about, but might not be financially viable, it would be the Jay Bennett Cry Now Cry Later columns.
Yeah,
the John Darnielle column.
Well, the trick is that I could see an audience for a South Pole Dispatch book, and John and I have talked about it at times over the years. I think it would be interesting to maybe, it would be difficult to pare it down to our favorites, and then our favorites that he and I would agree on, to make it work. But to me, that's not an impossible short run book that could be a blast. I don't know when we would do it, since if you think my schedule is crazy, his is even worse. So, and like, like me, he's got 2 young kids, almost exactly the same age as my kids. So, yeah, I would be all about that book. I mean, there's a book that'll be on the schedule for 2022 that'll be out in October or November, but it's going to be another genre book, another subgenre book, a la USBM, and it's going to focus on a style in a country. So I'm super psyched on that. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah. I mean, the one South Pole Dispatch column that makes me just like howl laughing to this day is the one where it's the newspaper board and they're changing everything to be about blood.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites is the in the Neurosis issue that we did. He did one that was Neurosis, like NU with an umlaut, and I think it was them recording an album with Ross Robinson. And I still think about it sometimes. I mean, there are so many good ones. There's Demonez from Immortal at Demonez Piano Bar, like him just like being a piano player in a piano bar. Jeff Hanneman solo album. There's just too many to. I mean, there are literally 150 some. They're all brilliant. Yeah. I mean, they're not all brilliant, but the vast majority of them are. But maybe someday.
Well, I'm going to let you get back to your evening, and I'm going to go dig out some of the old South Pole Dispatches now.
Awesome. Time well spent for both of us. So, I appreciate you having me on, Roger. Thanks, man.
Yeah, have a good one, Albert.
Cool. You too, dude.
Run you,